Integration makes your telescope bigger. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? How on earth can integration time make your telescope bigger? And of course, it's not a literal statement. It's not like more integration time is going to make your telescope grow. But there is an old saying in astrophotography that is very true. Aperture is king. A telescope is fundamentally a light bucket. Its job is to capture as much light from the faint depths of space as it possibly can. And the wider the bucket, the more photons are going to fall into it. Exactly the same as if you were putting a real bucket out on a rainy day. A wider bucket is going to capture more light over a unit of time than a narrower bucket. Telescopes are exactly the same. And it would be awesome to have a wide telescope. I really wish I had a C11 or C14 and a mount adequate to hold them. What I could accomplish if I had a telescope like that living beneath these dark skies as I do. But there is a way to work around the limitations of aperture. Time. Width is a dimension and time is another dimension. The goal of increasing a telescope's width is to capture more light over time. But by adding time, in this case specifically integration time, we can capture more light over width. And so we see that time on target, or time focusing a telescope on a single DSO to increase integration, is like flipping space-time dimensions. Time on target has effects similar to aperture on target. More aperture allows more light over a smaller amount of time, and more time allows more light over a smaller amount of aperture. What I'm saying is, if you're in astrophotography and you don't have a huge telescope, patience is your best asset. Increasing integration time makes your telescope bigger. Now, wave hi to the Sky Story Observatory's mascot, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean.
Greetings, Earthlings!
Alright, now my mascot and I are going to show you the results of photographing MUL 4, also known as the WR-134 Stellar Wind Nebula, over 9 nights. I developed the results over each of the 9 nights to make this video. And I pushed the developing hard to test the potential of the information that was gathered over each night until we finally hit the night when we had enough information. It's another unusual or interesting thing about astrophotography. When you hit the point where you have enough information, it jumps out at you. Here's night 1. I pushed the developing really hard here because it's not enough information. You can tell by the roiled look of the photograph. It reminds me of a geological feature, les agneaux roulés, French for rolled sheep, except set out in space. Here's night 2, and it stands out as smoother, though it's far from complete. Les agneaux roulés are gone, and the detail presents as smoother, the luminosity is more balanced, and we have a better view of the emission and reflection nebulae at the center. Here's night 3, and the view is even smoother now, the detail gentler, subtler. And we're starting to see detail begin to emerge in the faint oxygen-3 regions toward the center of the stellar wind bubble, as well as further definition of detail in the bright upper right of the stellar wind bubble. Now we're into night 4. We have more detail starting to show up in the red hydrogen emissions areas, and other reflective material in those areas is beginning to show up. And suddenly, by way of only the LRGB filters, we're pulling in a lot of material in the primarily O3 region of the stellar wind bubble. Here is night 5, and even more high-frequency information is being refined. It always takes longer to get high-frequency information, which is fine detail, than low-frequency information, which is light, shadow, and color. We have detail showing up all throughout the stellar wind bubble, from the faint rim on the left to the bright upper right, and even where it overlays the hydrogen emission areas down on the lower right. And there are patches of high-frequency detail beginning to show throughout the central areas of the bubble, even overlaying the small reflection and emission nebulae toward the center of the stellar wind bubble. And in the top region, we have a pale, ghostly white-blue area. Very faint gases in that area starting to show up. There's no fine detail within their emissions to be made out, at least not with just this much integration. But the fact that those very faint gases are there is now imminently evident. Here's night 6. We're starting to see variations in color even over the hydrogen emissions areas, meaning we are beginning to capture faint traces of gases, O3 emissions, nitrogen gases, and other things which were extremely faint, at least in contrast to the much brighter materials such as the O3 emissions in the upper right, and the bright red hydrogen emissions all around the outskirts of the image except for the top center where it's very dark. And at the same time, we're beginning to pull in a lot of fine detail all throughout the stellar wind bubble. It's still faint, but it's becoming more resolved. Here is night 7. I've stopped pushing the brightness so hard in order to home in on the fine detail that is beginning to really evolve with increasing integration. At this point, the image is up to about 18 or 19 hours of integration. We have fine detail in the O3 region in the upper right, as well as in the moderately bright O3 area of the stellar wind bubble toward the left. And we're beginning to see whiffs of other kinds of gases leaning toward white, especially in the upper right of the image. The resolution of all this fine detail is also telling me that I'm getting close to having enough information to begin doing a finessed final development of the information I have so far. But the color and the fine detail yet remains a bit weak, and there is not quite enough natural transition between light and shadow, so I'm going to push the integration time even more. This is night 8, and at this point I have about 26 hours of integration. I have good fine detail in the brighter regions of the image. That would be the red areas to the right, at the bottom, and on the left. Those areas are predominated by hydrogen. However, the transitions between the brighter and darker areas within the red regions are, over sudden, too sharp, which tells me the image does not yet have enough integration for smooth and natural transitions between light and shadow. The stellar wind bubble itself shows a lot of high-frequency information, meaning its brighter and mid-bright regions now have enough integration. But at the very top of the image, there is a faint sort of tail or sail of O3 gases blowing off the stellar wind bubble into that dark region up toward the top center of the image. It's very dark and very faint, and it's not really showing up yet. So this image needs another night of integration. Here is the image with 9 nights or 32 hours worth of integration. It is a hybrid of LRGB and HA and O3 information. There is now enough information that I can darken the hydrogen emission areas, the red areas, around the right, bottom, and left sides of the image primarily, letting them achieve a natural level of brightness, or revealing their own waves and currents as they are blown about by cosmic winds. And the detail and color of the stellar wind bubble is clearly visible without being forced, so it appears natural within the image. These small emission and reflection nebulae within the stellar wind bubble have achieved a natural-looking brightness, a sort of glow to them, and up at the top center of the image, O3 gases that are blowing off, probably blended with dust or gases of other materials, present pale whites and blues, revealing their presence in the area. And small, faint patches, like wisps of cloud trying to form, reveal the nature of the forces acting on them, most likely emanating from the Wolf Rayet star at the center of this image. But what's important for our purposes is that we started with an image where a little bit of detail was shown, but it really had to be forced. And as we added more integration time, detail began to show up more easily, as well as color, light, and shadow began to appear within the image more naturally, until finally, at 32 hours of integration, we had captured enough light to present the image well, thoroughly, fully, with all of its detail, light, shadow, and color appearing natural and beautiful within the image. The telescope I used to capture this was only a 203mm Schmidt-Cassegrain, more commonly known as the Celestron C8. But integration added light over time. The same as aperture would add light over space. Integration, effectively, makes your telescope bigger. The moral of the story is fundamentally, the longer you keep your telescope pointed at the same DSO, the better your final image is going to be. To be honest, I plan to shoot this image more next year when it's well positioned again, and hopefully add yet another 30 hours to it, because I want my telescope to get even bigger. Have a great time shooting the sky.